There's a question I've been thinking about lately. What actually makes someone a good person? Think about it. Imagine a man who spends his entire life doing good things. He helps people, he gives to charity, he takes care of his family, he tries to be kind, but somewhere in his life he does something genuinely terrible. Now imagine another man. Someone who has made mistake after mistake, someone who has hurt people, lied, been selfish, and done things he regrets. But near the end of his life, he genuinely changes. He regrets what he did. He asks for forgiveness, and he tries to become a different person. So which man is good? And more importantly, what would either of them deserve? Because I think this is where the conversation about God gets much deeper than simply asking, does God exist? It becomes a question about what we are. Human beings are imperfect, we know that. We lie, we become jealous, we hurt people, we act selfishly. Sometimes we know something is wrong and we do it anyway. And that's essentially what Christianity means when it talks about sin. Sin isn't just some long list of really horrible things that only evil people do. It's the idea that human beings have fallen short of the perfect standard. And if God is actually perfect, then none of us are. Not me, not you, not the nicest person you've ever met, nobody. And that creates a really uncomfortable question. If God is perfectly good and we're imperfect, why would any of us deserve heaven? Because if heaven is supposed to be the presence of a perfectly good God, then why should an imperfect person simply be entitled to it? And then we get to the opposite question. Why would anyone deserve hell? If God is loving, why would he allow someone to be separated from him forever? And I don't think you can answer one of these questions without eventually having to confront the other. Because if justice matters, then what does justice actually mean? If someone spends their life hurting people, should it simply not matter? Should everything they've done just disappear? But then there's mercy. If someone genuinely changes, should they be permanently defined by the worst thing they've ever done? Christianity's answer to this isn't really that there are a bunch of perfect people who earn their way into heaven. It's almost the opposite. The Christian argument is that nobody is perfect. That's why grace matters. That's why forgiveness matters. And that's why Jesus is at the center of Christianity. The idea is that humanity can't simply make itself perfect. We need forgiveness. We need redemption. We need something beyond ourselves. And whether you believe it or not, I think the underlying question is fascinating, because we all seem to believe, at least instinctively, some things are just genuinely wrong. We don't say, I personally don't like murder. We say murder is wrong. We don't just say, I personally dislike betrayal, because we know betrayal is wrong. So where does that sense of objective morality come from? That's another question I don't think we should casually brush aside. And if you're an atheist, I'm not going to assume that means you don't care about morality, and that's not fair. There are atheists who are some of the most compassionate people you'll ever meet. The question is different, though. If you don't believe God exists, what ultimately makes something objectively good or objectively evil? Maybe there is an answer. Maybe morality can exist without God, but that's something worth debating. But here's another thought. If heaven is fundamentally being with God, then why would someone who doesn't want God necessarily want heaven? If someone who spends their entire life saying, I don't want anything to do with God, why would eternal existence in God's presence automatically be what they want? And I know Christianity has more complicated answers to this. Hell isn't necessarily as simple as God sends people somewhere because they didn't believe correctly. Different Christians understand hell differently. But traditionally, one of the ideas associated with hell is separation from God. And if God is the source of everything good, then separation from him would simply be something much more profound than being in a bad place. But then we reach what might be the hardest question of all. If God exists, why is the world like this? Why do bad things happen to good people, and why do good things happen to bad people? You've probably heard that question before, but actually sit with it. Why does someone who spends their life trying to do the right thing sometimes suffer terribly? And why does someone who lies, cheats, manipulates people, or hurts others sometimes seem to have an amazing life? Why does someone pray for something with everything they have and nothing happens? Why does someone else seem to get everything they want without ever asking? These questions have been around for thousands of years, and honestly, I don't think anyone has an answer that makes every tragedy suddenly feel okay. I don't think saying everything happens for a reason automatically makes someone's suffering disappear. Sometimes we simply don't know, and that's uncomfortable. Because if God is all-powerful, then we naturally ask, why doesn't he stop it? Why doesn't God intervene every time someone is about to make a terrible decision? Why doesn't he prevent every accident? Why doesn't he stop every disease? Why doesn't he prevent every tragedy? And Christianity has answers involving free will, human nature, and the consequences of sin, and the idea that God can bring good out of suffering. But even then, there are moments where I don't think we can honestly say we understand why exactly something happened. Maybe some things happen because human beings have free will. Maybe some things happen because actions have consequences. Maybe some things happen because we live in a physical world governed by natural laws. And maybe sometimes we simply don't know. And I think that's where faith becomes difficult. Because faith isn't necessarily saying, I understand everything. Rather, sometimes faith is saying, I don't understand everything, but I still believe. And I think there's something important about admitting that. Because there are questions about God that I don't know how to answer. There are questions about suffering that I don't know how to answer. There are questions about heaven and hell that I just don't understand. And I don't think pretending otherwise makes faith stronger. If anything, I think admitting what you don't know makes the conversation more honest. Because maybe the biggest mistake we make when talking about God is assuming that every discussion is supposed to end with a question solved. Maybe it isn't. Maybe the questions themselves are part of the reason we keep searching, because underneath all of this, the heaven, hell, sin, morality, suffering, atheism, Christianity, and God, we're really asking one enormous question. What does it mean to be human? Why are we here? Why do we know the difference between what we should do and what we actually should be doing? Why do we feel guilt? Why do we search for meaning? Why do we care about justice? Why do we love the people, even though we know we'll eventually lose them? And if there really is a God, what does he want from us? Maybe the answer isn't that we're supposed to become perfect. Rather, maybe the point is to recognize that we're imperfect, that we recognize when we've done wrong, that we seek forgiveness, that we try to become better, and that we stop pretending we're above everyone else. Because at the end of the day, I don't think any of us are the perfect man. We're all the imperfect man, and we've all fallen short somewhere. And maybe that's exactly why the question of God matters so much. Not because we have all the answers, but because we don't. And maybe the search for those answers is one of the most human things we could do.